with a fresh episode of The Weekend. I am Murtaza Solangi.
And I am Muhammad Ali.
Well, this week has been quite exciting. We opened the week with a great discussion with Indian security analyst Praveen Saini, discussing pretty much everything under the sun, especially US-India relations and the emerging global powers and the subject of strategic autonomy, etc. But going forward, this week has been quite extraordinary. Monday, we had French president in Oval Office, and exciting interaction with the press. We saw Emmanuel Macron even correcting Trump. That was quite a moment. And then on Thursday, we saw the British Prime Minister going there. Both have been very active. We have a new government coming up in Germany. And as we are discussing and recording this show, we are told that Ukrainian president, who was earlier called dictator by Trump, Mr. Trump has almost expressed his ignorance about his comments and says, "Did I say that? I don't believe it." So things are changing quite fast. Including Mr. Trump's comments, not about Pakistan, as some of the folks, especially pro-PTI, would want. He has again commented on Afghanistan. So there are other issues that we will discuss, but let me start with you. How do you see these developments, Europe, America, Russia, and Mr. Trump's comments?
I think this week was marked by very hectic diplomatic activity at three levels. As you rightly pointed out, the British, French, and Ukrainian leadership rushed to Oval Office in order to try to pacify the aggressive policies that Mr. Trump has promised towards friends and foes alike. But it is very interesting to notice that his policy announcements have worried perhaps the closest US allies far more than its challengers like China and Russia. And I recall you once said about a couple of months ago that his return to Oval Office, I think, will be welcomed with a broad smile in Moscow. And it seems that seems to be the case. That is one aspect. But I think despite these hectic, high-level diplomatic efforts by Britain, by France, and by Ukraine to try to maintain the alliance structure, the transatlantic alliance structure, and US security commitment towards the security of the Western Europe, I don't think they succeeded. And while Mr. Trump was diplomatic and graceful, but he definitely stopped short of offering any review or commitment to these three European leaders. Secondly, I think US continues to attract most interest and concern around the world, whether it is declining US security commitment towards Europe, whether it is increasingly aggressive and hostile diplomatic, economic, and military stance towards China, or his sustained effort at cutting down on the size of his government and different departments. So at home, you can clearly notice there's a a sense of panic among major US government departments, ranging from CIA to Pentagon to Department of Education. And there seems to be, in fact, the USAID officials were given 15 minutes to clear their table and leave. So I think that is a major trend that, is being witnessed in Washington. But that is very important for allies and friends alike, because they are noticing that if Mr. Trump is so merciless at home, what can the allies, partners who are habitual of receiving aid, assistance, and cooperation from US magnanimously can expect realistically? So I think it's a worrying sign for all those countries which expect to maintain US assistance and aid programs. I think in terms of the tariff war, the most significant news is that in addition to the initial 10% tariffs raise threatened to China, has been added and increased to a 20% level. So that is going to be very significant, because my last comment on this particular issue is that the governor of Arkansas has announced that they will pursue a policy of getting rid of all Chinese investment from the US state.
Interesting. As much as European powers, especially France and Germany, France and UK, are trying to put up a brave face and trying to use diplomatic jargon and announcing things that would appear to be like a bandage to a major surgery. They are actually planning and working on alternate plans.
Can you share a few?
Say, for example, before Mr. Starmer would land in Washington, in British Parliament, he announced that we are going ahead by initially starting raising our expenditure on defense, starting with 2.5% of the GDP, and it will go to 3%. And both UK and France have already announced that if the peace deal comes through with Ukraine, they would be willing to deploy their boots on the ground, both French and UK. And I'm sure other European powers like Germany, where recently elections have been held, they would also do the same. So tariffs would also probably be applied on Europeans, and Europe is already working on a different security arrangement, not relying on NATO. Maybe NATO would be dead. If it's not dead, then the input of US would not be the same as it used to be. And even as we heard the news of Mr. Zelensky arriving in Washington and Mr. Trump eating his own words, but I'm not still sure that this rare earth minerals arrangement would go as Mr. Trump had wanted it to go. So the devil is in the details. When the details of any agreement comes out, we would find out how it has fared.
Indeed, and I just want to add briefly that I have noticed that Britain, France, and Turkey have emerged as the three most important countries who seek opportunity for greater influence and security role within Europe with the declining US security commitment in Europe. Istanbul is hosting very important talks between US and Russia, in which, notwithstanding Ukraine peace talks, the revival and resumption of diplomatic ties and economic and energy cooperation between Moscow and Washington has also been discussed. So it seems that US and Russia are already serious about progressing and improving their bilateral ties. And that is also, while on one side creating insecurity and concern by the declining US security commitment within Western European capitals, but it has also been seen as an opportunity by the major defense industry of Europe, whose share prices have risen in anticipation of greater defense orders from the European manufacturers, in contrast to the American manufacturers.
I see one more emerging scenario. If you remember, Europeans have been reluctant and hesitant in accepting Turkey in EU.
Indeed.
Well, besides the fact that Turkey has been part of NATO, I expect this changing. Yes. I think in the new emerging scenario where US is distancing itself and trying to stick to Monroe Doctrine and Hoover Doctrine, Turkey's role in European Union possibly would increase. They might even get full membership.
I agree with you.
And not only that, but I also see the possibilities of European Union and European countries, including UK, a different dimension of economic and security arrangements with Global South.
Indeed. And I think I agree with you on Turkey. I think they are very tactfully using it as a diplomatic opportunity to offer a greater security role within European politics in return for the expected joining of European Union, which they have been declined for so many years. But let's move to...
Before we move away,
yes.
There was something on my mind. I'm sure you have seen in global literature on emerging global order what has been dubbed as reverse Nixon initiative. In 72, when Pakistan helped US to, establish a new kind of relationship between China and USA, and that helped China wean away from the socialist bloc and act against former Soviet Union, which resulted almost in the collapse and downfall of Soviet Union. There are thinkers who think that Trump is trying to do this reverse Nixon effect and wean Russian Federation away from China. I think it's a wishful thinking. Russians are not that unintelligent to understand this. So as much as they get cozy and play footsie with Trump, they would not take this risk of breaking their bond with China.
Very profound thought, I think. Very interesting times. Mr. Trump also hosted the first formal cabinet meeting in which a number of issues were discussed. But a couple of issues which drew a lot of interest and attention in South Asia is the emphasis on Afghanistan again becoming a source of a threat to international peace and security as a result of the revival of terrorist organizations in Afghanistan. And Mr. Trump also expressed deep concern at the large number of arms, weapons, vehicles, aircraft being left to the Afghan Taliban by the Biden administration. And it was described by Mr. Trump as a grave mistake. In fact, the new US Secretary of Defense has announced inquiry of those officials who managed and planned such a hurried and badly planned military exodus of US forces from Afghanistan. What does this mean for Afghanistan, and what should Pakistan read into it?
Well, it's clear that there is realization what that hasty withdrawal has done to this region. And the reports of SIGAR and UN Security Council's Special Committee on Al-Qaeda establish beyond any reasonable doubt that Afghanistan has once again become a heaven of terrorists of all shapes, and Afghan Taliban have reneged on their commitment they made in Doha. And those terrorist groups, including Daesh or ISKP, are fully operational. And I would think that it's the matter of time, but I have a feeling that today's terrorist attack in Madrasa Haqqaniya might have people linked to ISKP, and I would not be surprised if those people came crossing Afghan border and might have done this. So this is a serious threat to the global order, to the countries of this region. And this creates a window of opportunity of security cooperation between Pakistan and United States. And if you link it with the recent unfreezing of the financial aid related to security in Pakistan, I think $395 million, then it will make perfect sense that the future window of cooperation between Pakistan and US would have a bearing on situation in Afghanistan and terrorism.
I share your forecast of greater convergence on security and counterterrorism areas between Washington and Islamabad as a realistic prospect in the days to come, because I've noticed Mr. Trump and his administration view terrorism as a greater threat than the great power competition, it seems. And that is the difference that you notice in the approach of the Biden administration, which felt that the great power competition deserves greater commitment, interest, and resource allocation than the threat of terrorism. And it seems that neglect has allowed some of the dark spots around the world to facilitate and enable these global terrorist organizations to grow in their influence and power, which is why Trump administration is more worried about them. And we hope and expect that the first national security strategy under the Trump administration might well rank global terrorist organization as a major threat, and we might stop short of large-scale military operation, but there could be, surgical strikes and some air attacks against high-value terrorist individuals. And we have already seen a few air attacks by the US in Syria, killing affiliates of Daesh and
in
Al-Qaeda as well, and Somalia as well.
Earlier.
So I think this provides an insight into the preferred security approach of the Trump administration. But I want your comment on the assassination as a result of a unfortunate bomb explosion in a very famous and large religious seminary in Akoda Khatak, Madrasatul Haqqaniya. You identified ISKP as a possible suspect involved in terms of its motive. What could be the possible reasons for your assessment?
Well, they have already, in their literature, declared the ideology of Haqqaniya as opposed to their school of thought. This is Salafist ideology versus this Deobandi. So that could be one of the possible reasons. If you remember, earlier attacks on even Maulana Fazl Rahman were claimed by ISKP. So I won't be surprised, but let's hold our breath and wait for the investigations to come out and maybe claim of a responsibility. But we have quite a few issues in our national politics, but since we are running out of time, so we would leave them to our next episode, and we will say goodbye till next week.
Thank you for joining us.